Howdy. We can do better than that. Let's try again. Howdy. Okay, I like that on a Saturday morning. I'm Max Angerholzer. I'm honored to be the CEO of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, and so happy to have you all here with us this morning. I gotta say it's impressive to have a full house for a Saturday morning event in a college town, so thank you all for being here. We have a lot of friends from Aggie Land that are here, but I know we also have a lot of people who drove from Austin and San Antonio and Dallas to be here with us this morning, so thank you for that. I'm honored to be part of the Bush Center here, and my partners in crime are Warren Finch, who's the director of the Bush Library, and General Mark Welsh, who is the dean of the Bush School. And it's an honor to work with them every day, and on behalf of all of our teams, we welcome you here. We're especially excited to have Barbara Pierce Bush and Jenna Bush Hager with us today. It's always exciting to have them in College Station, so thank you all for being a part of that. So the mission of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation is to protect and promote the legacies, the ideals and values of President and Mrs. Bush. And you all know that they stood for inclusiveness and civility and selfless service and helping others. And I honestly believe, and I think you all agree with me, that those ideals and values are more important than they've ever been with all the challenges we have at home and abroad. So we take great pride in being able to support and represent them every day. And when you think about that legacy, as I said, selfless service is at the top of it. And that's key to the ethos of Aggie Land as well. And so our partnership with Texas A&M is key to what we do. And I know we have Aggies in the room here today, and I know that April 21st is a very important day for Texas A&M. We just had muster on Thursday night, and that's where you really understand the importance of putting other people ahead of yourself and to experience that. And so I want to thank all the Aggies who are with us today and let you know that it's so obvious to us why President and Mrs. Bush picked Texas A&M for their presidential library. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the entire Bush family follows in the example of George and Barbara Bush, and all of the grandchildren have found ways to give back and to do meaningful things to help society, and no more so than Jenna and Barbara. And so we're really excited that they're going to talk about their new book here today. So before they join us on stage, I have to introduce our moderator, my very good friend Mary Kate Carey. She'll be out here in a second. She was a speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush in the White House. She's a professor in politics at the University of Virginia. She's a senior fellow at the Miller Center at UVA. And back in 2014, she did an amazing documentary called 41 on 41, where she interviewed 41 individuals who had a relationship with President Bush. So I would encourage y'all to find that online. It's great. And also, and most importantly for the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, she is chair of our advisory council. So it's always an honor to have Mary Kate here with us, and I would like to invite her out on the stage. Please welcome.
Thanks. There we go. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. It's always a pleasure for me to be at the Bush Foundation here, and especially in this auditorium where the Bushes were many times over the years. So it's a pleasure to be back. Let me start by introducing our guests this morning. They'll be out in just a second. Jenna Bush Hager is a host of the NBC Today Show. She's most recently the co-host of the fourth hour of the Today Show, which is Today with Hoda and Jenna. She lives in New York City with her husband and her two daughters, Mila and Poppy, and their brother, Hal. Barbara Pierce Bush is the board chair and the co-founder of the Global Health Corps, which mobilizes over 1,000 young leaders to help solve some of the world's biggest health problems. And just this week, she was also a co-host of today's fourth hour. They haven't changed the name yet to Today with Barbara and Jenna, but I expect that's coming soon. And she is the new mom of Cora, Georgia. Jenna and Barbara are the co-authors of their newest book, the Superpower Sisterhood. They are also the co-authors of several #1 New York Times bestsellers. This one here, I brought them out with me. Sisters First was their first children's book, and Sisters First, Stories from Our Wild and Wonderful Life was their grown-up book, which I just read, has all kinds of great stories. Affectionately known as the Bush Twins, please join me in welcoming Jenna Bush Hager and Barbara Pierce Bush. Hey. So welcome. We're really glad you're here. And I know you're on a busy schedule of travel, so thanks for taking the time to come here. So one thing that Max did not say in the intro of me is I have sisters who are twins, just like you guys, not identical, very different personalities. One is more blonde, one is more brunette. It's really kind of uncanny how similar. And my sisters, one is a pretty serious business executive, and the other is a professional sailor who has sailed around the world.
That sounds fun. Am I the professional sailor?
And I'll leave that to you guys.
In the relationship? Because I hope so.
You've probably traveled around the world more.
But she's a serious businesswoman.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting.
I'm both of them.
I have two daughters, just like you do. My mom had a sister who was great, my godmother, my favorite aunt. And I have lots of found sisters in my life, many in Bush World, and met 3 new ones yesterday on the golf course at Traditions. So, so along those lines, you know, my sisters love to talk about twin power and the bond they have with each other. As you can imagine, twins, I think it's probably worse with identical twins, where people label them as, oh, that's the funny one, or that's the outgoing one, or whatever.
Or that's the sailor.
That's the sailor, right.
No, I'm the sailor. Sorry.
So, so can you tell us about, you know, the various ways people tell the two of you apart, and what the truth is really about your sisterhood and how you guys relate to each other?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're 40, and even you mentioned when Barbara hosted the show.
Yes.
Even when she hosted the show, somebody I work with who I like a lot was like, "Oh, you're shyer than she is," and Barbara was like, "Wait, what?" And she said, "What did you say?"
I was like, no, it's not that I'm not quiet. It's just it's hard to get a word in with her.
I know. See, she's very funny, and people don't think she's funny. They think I'm the funny one. But I am the funny one.
You are the funny one.
I mean, I was an entertainer for sure. Even stealing the spotlight by lifting my dress with my dignified grandfather giving a speech. But it looks like we were potty trained, so good on Mom. But do you want to answer?
Sure. Okay. So I think when you're twins, people expect you can't both be the same thing for whatever reason.
Like we both can't be the sailor.
Right.
But we both could be.
We could be the sailor if we wanted to be.
We both like to be the sailor, but we don't know how to sail. So
yeah.
There's a few things we've got to learn. But for whatever reason, when you're twins, and this might be the case for sisters also, we just don't know because there's only us. People expect one to be one thing and the other to be another thing, and usually they're opposites. And for us, that's not the case. I mean, we look different, and actually I think that's nice because then I think it's probably hard to navigate your identity when you look exactly like somebody else.
I think that would be really
in the
hard to
world.
be an identical twin. Yeah.
But we love doing a lot of the same things. We just also love doing different things, and our parents never compared us and let us figure out what we loved. I'm eating gum in that photo, clearly. Let us do what we loved and let us figure out who we wanted to be in the world, which were different things and different paths, which is very liberating, but also was probably a lot harder on our parents because then, you know, they had to take me to dance, and Jenna was a great singer as a child. They had to take her to go singing lessons. Well, do you want to talk about your singing career?
I wanted to be a singer, and my parents made me believe that I could be a singer. But I went to a lot of auditions, and I never made the part. So obviously,
she was desperate to be Cosette from Les Miserables.
But like, what about that screams like French Revolution? You know, I was like a well-fed Texan that was not suffering the way that they were in Les Miserables, obviously by the title. So I blame it on my appearance. It could have been my skills.
That's good.
I'm not sure, but I think probably my skills weren't up to par to make the local
It's not
theater.
too late. It's not too late.
No, I actually have been. I got to be on Broadway, and I'm on
Did you
TV
really?
every single day.
Yeah,
so
she found her role as an entertainer, even if it's not like as
Playing
a
a
dramatic
part.
actress.
yeah.
Wait, I'm curious. What were you doing on Broadway?
Oh, I got to be on Broadway for a day in Chicago.
No kidding.
Is that a cat? Did you hear that?
I did
Yes.
hear that.
Or is that a baby? I've never heard a baby make a sound like
But
that
we
before.
love it. If it's a baby,
If
that
it's a
meows,
baby or
then
a
it's
cat, they're both invited.
Okay.
Sorry, we just got totally
so
off the
here's
rails.
the book.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about that for just a moment. What makes this book different than your first book?
So for our first book,
Yes, have it here.
Sisters First, it is a love letter to sisterhood. Obviously,
That's
we were
this one.
born twins, and I think we both agree that it's the best thing that ever happened in our life because we had a partner in everything we did. We lived a totally normal life in Texas in very unusual circumstances given the role of our granddad and our parents. And so we had a partner to go through, to navigate that with when none of our friends could necessarily relate. So Sisters First is a love letter to sisterhood in the traditional sense. We have our little jeans
I know. I wish I still had those
Me
jeggings.
The little.
But in our new book, even though it's a book about sisterhood, the main character is an only child, and her name is Emma, and she's actually based on her mom, who is an only child,
Right.
and our mom desperately wanted siblings, and unfortunately, our grandmother suffered a number of miscarriages. So my mom's first memory is being in the hospital, looking through the plexiglass at the NICU at her little brother who wouldn't survive, and she said she would wish upon a star always for siblings. And she never got blood siblings, but she has the same best friends that she's had since she was a little kid in Midland, Texas. And they go on a hiking trip every summer, and they're like her sisters. And so in our book, the main character is Emma, and all of a sudden, in one day, two sets of sisters move onto her street. And all of a sudden, she's an honorary sister, and she has this sisterhood. So it's a love letter to sisterhood in the broader sense of who our chosen family is, and how our sisters have our back, and how our skills that are totally normal in the book, their powers are normal powers. One's good at math, one's good at dancing, etc. But when they're with their sisters, they become superpowers.
Right.
And so it's about sisterhood in that way.
I love that. As long as we have the book up, I noticed that all these projects that you're seeing on the screen that the kids are doing in the neighborhood to help their neighborhood thrive, is the way you guys put it, immediately reminded me of, as a speechwriter, one of the most famous sentences your grandfather said many times: any definition of a successful life must include service to others. Over the course of my life, I have seen community service evolve from a punishment that was given by the juvie.
I did do community service when I went to when we got arrested, so I get it.
That's what I'm
I get
talking
it.
about.
And I was glad to do it. Listen,
Right.
to get that taken off my record. So, but yes.
So it used to be a punishment, and we have now come to see that service to others brings all these benefits, not just to the person who's being helped,
Yes.
but to the person who's giving the help. And so I made a little list of all the things that the kids in the book are doing to help their neighborhood thrive. They decide they're going to build a clubhouse, but the kid who's good at math figures out how much paint and 2x4s they need. They build planters for Mrs. Rosa. They have a pet adoption service. They start a fundraising concert for the animal shelter. They convene a dance party for the community. They clean up the park. And
You forgot to say they fixed Mr. Potty's potty.
I left that out.
Yeah, you were trying to be dignified and a lady,
Sorry.
but we got to let the people know what they really
fixed the
do.
potty. Yeah, they did fix somebody's potty.
Yeah,
Mr. Potty's potty. Yes.
We thought that was hilarious, and my kids agreed, so we kept in. Kids really love potty talk.
It's in there. It's in there.
Yeah.
So tell me about why you did it that way, and it wasn't just the kids playing in the neighborhood together and becoming friends. Why
Well,
did you put that in?
Yeah, I think that's, just to expand on what Barbara was saying, that's what these girls do. There's a little, they write in a journal about their oath. And the oath is, we will use our powers for good. And I think that's the whole point, that not only do they have these like, you know, regular but extraordinary talents, but they actually use them to do things, you know? I mean, I think our grandfather talked about service, but he also did it.
Yeah.
And that's what's most important, you know? He didn't just talk about it. He did things, he was so humble, most of the things he didn't even talk about. We didn't know till after he died, for example, that he was paying for a little boy in the Philippines college education who wrote to him, and he just said, sure, I'll pay for it. Like,
And they wrote letters to each other, and the little boy had no idea who
that he was the president.
he was, because he didn't say who he was.
He just called himself like GB or something. And the point is that it's great to have talents, but it's even better to use your talents for good. And we want our girls to know that. We want all girls to know that, you know, and how to, boys as well. So I think that's the point.
Yeah.
And also, you know, one voice is like a whisper, you know, but a chorus of kids can really change the world, of adults too. So I think that's, and, you know, Gampy said points of light. That's what they do.
Yeah. And one of the things that jumped out at me too about that section of the book is it's one thing to have a program that needs volunteers and you can sign up or not sign up. And sometimes it's a match and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
It seems so much more important, especially in young kids, to help them figure out what they're good at.
Yeah.
Like your parents did, you know, one does dance, the other does singing, you don't both do the same thing. And then say, well, how can I use that skill to help someone else?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
the kid who's good at math, figuring out the number of gallons of paint.
Yeah.
I love that part of it because I think that really speaks to each person realizing their own talents and saying, what can I do to
And
help?
also, it doesn't have to be huge things, you know? Kids can just be kind to others at school, and that makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, and we also saw this during the pandemic, of course, of you didn't need to sign up for a program if your neighbor couldn't go out. You could get
Right.
groceries for them or whatever that might be. And all the research showed actually that people that were feeling isolated and lonely would not feel isolated and lonely if they can help somebody else. Like one way to actually help your own mental health is by helping somebody else.
Yeah.
And that goes for kids or adults, but I think we especially wanted this for kids because kids have this beautiful idea that they can change the world. I mean, I remember feeling like that as a kid.
During the pandemic, actually, we were in Long Island, and we did this food delivery program. I did it every single Friday because I don't work on Fridays. And Mila, my daughter, came with me. And she was like, but why don't we take them books too? Because she kind of we delivered food to the same houses every single week. So she got to know the kids, and there were kids her age. And I was so happy that she could come with me, you know, Zoom school, it was over by noon, thanks a lot, teachers. But, you know, so she came with me, and then she was the one that was like, let's go through our books and get books to take to these kids, because what are they reading, you know? And it's like, that's the point.
Love it.
Kids are often the ones that are, you know, can do more, can see more, can be more creative. You know, they're not jaded by the world yet. And we actually wrote this during the pandemic.
Oh,
so
good.
we didn't really think, like, and not only now when you go on book tour do you even think why we wrote it and the way we did. But Barbara and I were not together. I didn't see my family for...
It was the early days of the pandemic when like everyone was social isolating. And we were doing it back and forth via text and email and phone calls, which was also fun to have a project that was different to do together with
have
someone
something
you
to
love
talk
when you
about
weren't able
besides
to get
toilet
together.
paper,
Love it.
right? I know you weren't talking about toilet paper because you lived with mom and dad, but I lived by myself with 3 children. So I was talking about logistics and toilet paper, you know? Anyway.
So to the point about books, many times your grandmother sat on this stage and read books to thousands of school children all over Texas on a regular basis. And it's such a joy to be here where she was. You just celebrated 3 years of Read with Jenna. You've talked many times about the influence of your mom as a librarian and your grandmom with the Literacy Foundation. can you talk about, for example, how you're engendering that love of reading? What made Mila say, let's bring them books? Like, how did you get her to that point?
I think it's in our DNA. I mean, and by the way, like I look up at that book, Sin for Me, and I'm like, my grandma would have loved that book, and it makes me want to cry. Because she was so fun to recommend books to. And even we just went upstairs to their apartment that's the same as it was before they passed away. And I was having so much fun like looking through their bookshelves, you know? And I think, you know, when it's hard not to love something when the people that you love it so much, you know? And so it's ingrained in us. I mean, we love to read because so much that I'm weeping thinking about sending a book recommendation to Ganny. So much that, you know, I make a career out of it. You know, it's in my blood. I love it. And I read for work constantly. And I did tell my boss when I was kind of grumpy and I was in a book desert trying to pick a book that for a month, it was hard to pick one for because there wasn't that much great things. Sorry, all the writers out there. But I was like, you've taken my one thing and made it work. But, you know, we did a book event with Ann Patchett, who's an incredible writer, and she said, and I don't actually know this to be 100% true. We haven't done the research, but she said she thinks she's heard that modeling reading is even more important than reading to your children. I know it's really important to read to your kids, so I'm not sure I think they're both important. And so, you know, I think having a mom and a grandmother and two grandmothers, you know, I'm named after my other grandmother, Jenna Welch, who lived in West Texas, and she loved to read. And for some reason, this is Jenna Grammy, and Barbara and I were named in such sort of a librarian way by our mother. It was alphabetically. Barbara came out first, she was baby A, so she was Barbara, and I came out second, so I was Jenna. But I think, and I've thought a lot about why Grammy and Ganny loved to read so much. I mean, maybe they had mothers that read, and this could be, you know, philosophical and off, but I felt like for our grandmother Jenna, she was so curious. She didn't graduate from college, but she did take classes at the local community college till she couldn't drive anymore. And she wanted to she's the type of woman that would have wanted to travel widely. She had a National Geographic subscription that Barbara and I pored over. So I think she read to go to all these places she would never go to.
It opened up her world to learn about these places she'd never end up, but still could end up in her mind.
Yeah.
And then I think our grandmother, our Ganny, you know, she moved to Midland, Texas from Rye, New York, which could not be more different.
When she was like 21,
she
right?
was young. And
with our dad as a baby.
With our dad as a baby. So even that would lead you to need some company somewhere, you know? And she, just kidding. I don't know what he was like as a baby. I'm sure he was quite charming. But she was alone, you know? She left without her family to Midland, which, you know, y'all all know Midland, but like I said this at a book event in New York, and I'm like, has anybody ever been to Midland? And nobody raised their hand. I mean, imagine what that was like in the 1950s.
Yeah.
She couldn't just fly home, you know, she was there. And so I think she was lonely for parts of her life. She had great friends, and she had a huge life, but I do think she read for company. You know, those Jane Austen novels that she loved so much, I feel like she thought, you know, those were the people that kept her company when she felt lonely and alone. And so, yes, I mean, that was...
And then we have, I mean, our mom was a librarian, and when we were little, our mom's cat that she had in her 20s, that then was our cat when we were little, his name was Dewey, after the Dewey Decimal System.
Dewey Decimal.
She named him that in her 20s.
Actually, my grandmother had this pillow, and I'm just putting it into the universe in case any of y'all know how to needlepoint.
I do, actually.
No, but Barbara, I'm gonna be Ganny's age by the time I get it. You have a brand new baby.
That's true. Continue.
I'm right.
Actually put it in the
I'm
universe,
putting it
but
out
I'll
to
leave
y'all,
it back up
because y'all
if
look like
anyone needs
some
help.
of y'all could needlepoint. But our grandmother had a needle-pointed pillow that said, "Reading is sexy." And it's the type of thing that when you lose somebody you love, you're not like, what do I want in the will, But why didn't I ask for that? I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
It probably
We don't know.
got
I mean, we think
I
someone just,
actually
like, gave
You were
it
looked
looking
in the
upstairs?
apartment, and I was gonna fully put it in my bag if it was up there, but it's not.
Well,
So if
hopefully-
you can, will you ask around?
Yeah, I will. I'm on it.
Okay.
I'm on it. Okay. I just can't get over Dewey the cat.
I know.
And she was in her 20s
Which
too,
is,
which
like,
is
the
even
funniest part
nerdier,
to us.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's change to you guys for a second, and so many of the things you've written about go back to this theme of sisterhood, and it sounds like there were quite a few antics in your early years that you were influencing each other as
for bad behavior.
yeah, maybe. But how did you affect each other as sisters as kids? Any funny stories? Anything you want to throw out into the universe?
I think the thing that was probably unusual for our mom is the opposite of being an only child is being a twin.
Right.
So we always had someone to play with at all times. I mean, we shared a room.
We didn't have play dates. I mean, I don't think play dates were a thing of the 80s and 90s anyway, were they?
Oh,
no,
yeah.
The word play date did not exist.
No, it was like
No.
walk down the street and find
Yeah,
another
yeah.
You could go
She-
play
yeah, be home by
with your
5.
friend's
Yeah.
house that
Right.
you walked to your neighbor's home and maybe
Right.
played, but like I can guarantee you my mom did not drive us to a play date.
No, and they weren't scheduled.
Every once in a while we might have had a slumber party,
Yeah.
but we went home with the person from school. She wasn't driving us there, right?
I have no memory of, yes.
You had one slumber party with Angie Nelson and her mom let you watch
Oh yeah, a fish
Wanda.
called Wanda, and we were in first grade,
Wow.
and my dad was mad.
Wow.
By the way, I recently rewatched it. It's held up and it's still funny, but definitely in first grade.
Inappropriate.
Totally, I had no idea what was happening.
Yeah,
Luckily, I didn't understand it.
I've never seen it.
It's sexy, and I mean, it's funny, but there's
Some bad.
But it's not sexy like reading is sexy.
No.
no. It's a different type of sexy. Anyway, our antics.
Oh, that.
Right.
This.
Yeah.
Yeah. We still have. Oh look, sissy.
Oh, we were lighting the Christmas tree with
there
our
you go.
grandmother in our matching little sweatsuits.
I feel like
that's
those were like Juicy Couture before Juicy Couture.
Yeah, totally.
I wish I still had that tracksuit.
Me too. It's got
Those were
little
pretty cute.
Christmas decorations. We did, and that's also a
Oh, there
really
you
excellent
go.
look.
Yeah, that screams 90s.
So then as you got older though, there was all kinds of things how you affected each other's lives as adults. For example, I think, isn't there a great story about Henry asking for your hand in marriage?
But he asked Barbara.
He asked me first.
Right.
Which is the right move if you're a twin. If anyone here is proposing to a twin, go to the twin first.
Yeah, I think that's a big moment in your life, and that he went to you before he went to your father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the same thing happen when you got married?
Well, my mom actually proposed to my husband, so it was actually a totally different
Yeah,
thing.
actually, the whole family kind of pressured Craig into marrying Barbara. So
It was like, when I think back about it, it was sort of like Downton Abbey, when they're like, oh no, who's she gonna marry? And they're like bringing all these suitors in.
and we're like, we don't know you at all, but you look handsome. Please marry my sister.
Mom proposed to Craig, and then when Craig went to ask my dad for my hand in marriage, my dad told everyone we were engaged. So, but I had never been proposed to. So I started getting all these congratulations text messages. My cousins were like, we're so thrilled, y'all are a great couple. And then like 20 minutes later, they were like, oh, so sorry, I meant to send that to somebody else. And I was like, Dad, you and Craig are engaged, Dad, but we have yet to get engaged.
Oh, that is so funny. Oh,
And
my
also,
gosh.
we were all like, Barbara, just get married. And she's like, should I? We're like, get married.
Like, my mom was like, I'm gonna call, we were in Kennebunkport, my mom was like, I'm just gonna call the priest and have him come over here. Craig was like, I
I don't even know
haven't
your name.
asked are my parents invited to our wedding? But it was fast and furious, and the reason it was is because we had just lost our grandmother, and we wanted, and our grandfather was so important. I mean, and he was my hero. I'm sure Jenna would say the same. and we wanted to make sure that he could be there. And so we got engaged in Maine, where Craig did figure this out, even though there were very few surprises, obviously, in our engagement. Craig figured out where my grandfather had proposed to my grandmother and proposed to me there.
Although Gampy does say that Ganny asked him, so it's a very similar
it's
scenario.
all the same, but I didn't even know that that's where they had gotten engaged. So when he proposed to me, he was like, your grandfather told me earlier today that this is where he proposed to your grandmother. So it was really beautiful. And then, I know, it makes me want to cry too. And then we got married about 3 weeks after we got engaged, because we just weren't, Gampy passed away shortly thereafter, and we just didn't know.
We did the right thing.
Time was not on our side, and couldn't have been better, because he was there and he sat next to me at the dinner.
Oh, I love that.
And it was a tiny wedding, just family, and we all sat at the dining room table that we all had all of our meals with our cousins. And Gampy was just in between Jenna and me for it.
What a joy.
And actually it started raining. She got married outside, and it started raining, and I'm like, there's Ganny. She's pissed we move her furniture around.
It's true.
It's true, and everybody agreed. Poppy right there, that's my daughter, Poppy. She was the ring bearer, and she opened they gave her a box without the ring in it because they were worried she was going to lose it, and she was like, it's a fake. It's a fake.
Where's the ring?
It's a fake, y'all. There's no ring.
The whole thing was actually hilarious for whatever reason. I don't know why we did this. We wanted someone to play music for me to walk down the aisle.
Right.
So for some reason we found this guy on Facebook. He
What could go wrong?
only knew he played this Can't Help Falling in Love, that Elvis song, when I walked down the aisle. And then we were like, oh, stay for an hour after and we'll have a little family dance party. But he only knew how to play La Bamba. So he played La Bamba for an hour straight, and we just danced to La Bamba for an hour. But anyway, it was joyful and hilarious.
I love that.
Except last summer, Mom and Dad had a party in Maine, and I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, why is the guitarist from the wedding here? And my dad's chief of staff was like, oh, well, I figured he would be great because
he played at your wedding.
And I was like, no, red flag. He doesn't know how to play anything.
Okay, that's hilarious. Okay, so I have to ask you, since you brought up Poppy. So there's a story in your book, the grown-up book,
yes,
about why Poppy is named Poppy, and I think it was from the documentary that I made. And
you made that documentary?
Yeah, 41 on 41.
Job.
Thank you.
Oh, you did? Bravo.
Good job. Wonderful.
I didn't say it for that reason.
Yes.
Yeah, 41 on 41. So tell the Bruce Gelb story.
So we
it's
went
a great
and
story.
saw a screening. I'm sure you were there. I love this picture and his lazy boy.
So cute.
Two puppies. So we went and saw the documentary that she made, which is really wonderful. If you haven't seen it, I think it's on HBO maybe.
CNN.
CNN Plus.
CNN Plus, not so fast.
Yeah.
No.
No.
But
anyway,
we'll fix it.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Too soon? No.
Too soon.
Sorry. I hope none of y'all work for CNN Plus. Okay, so we were watching this documentary, and I was pregnant. I knew it was a girl. We didn't find out with Mila, but we were so sure that Mila was a boy that we couldn't name her for 48 hours. And my dad kept calling and was like, what is the baby's name? And I'm like, Dad, I'm recovering from a C-section, and I do not know the baby's name, So with Poppy, we found out before because we felt like we should. Because we wanted to know.
Yeah,
anyway, okay, thank you. So we were watching this documentary. I was newly pregnant. I think only Henry and I knew at that point, but probably everybody knew because I'm an open book. I like to tell everything to everybody. But anyway, so we're sitting in the documentary, and this older gentleman comes on.
Bruce Gelb.
Bruce, what's his last name?
Gelb.
And he's Jewish. He was Jewish, right? He is Jewish.
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, I went to Andover, and people were making fun of me. And this is right before, World War II. There was probably lots of anti-Semitic behavior in our country and all over the world. He said somebody was making fun of me. And I all of a sudden heard Poppy Bush say, don't do that to him, and stand up for me. And he was an older gentleman crying, telling this story. And I looked at Henry and I'm like, let's name her Poppy. That's perfect. Like, that's what we want out of our girls, to use their voices for good. And so we did, and we called our grandfather. I feel like Barbara was probably in the room at this point. I can't remember.
Yeah,
she always was one of the first visitors. She would bring tacos and other things, but the doctors wouldn't let me eat. I'm like, no, I'm ready to eat. They're like, no, you're not allowed to. But I'm like, but I'm hungry.
So I would like sneak in tacos and donuts like under a coat.
Yeah. And so with Poppy, we FaceTimed. My parents were in Maine with our grandfather. She was born in August. And we FaceTimed and we said, we want you to meet Poppy. And he started tearing up. And so then I was just like weeping all over Poppy's face. You know, Poppy's like, wow, is this a shower? You know?
She's like, am I back in the womb? Am I in my amniotic sac?
Wow, that was one of the weirdest things you've ever said. I mean, top 10 weirdest things you've ever said.
Okay, that's funny.
I'm definitely going to say it again if I can.
Okay, try it on Sunday.
Not today, maybe tomorrow.
Too funny.
That's it.
That's
it. Yeah, it ended with the amniotic sac.
Okay, I'll move on.
Yeah. Okay, we can probably move on.
Yes, I think we can move on now. Okay, so now you're both parents, which is great. And I'll ask you both a question.
By the way, how good is Hal's bowl cut?
Oh, that is good.
Cute.
And I can't do it any other way. Like, people are like, his bowl cut. I'm like, it's not actually a bowl cut. That's just the way his hair grows.
Do you cut it?
We cut it.
No, I mean, do you personally cut it?
Yeah.
With a bowl?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It looks like a bowl cut, but it's just a cut.
Got it.
Like, we had bowl cuts, but I think that's just the way our hair grew.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so
Sorry.
when we talk in the book, you talk about the difference between your family sisters and your found family, right? So if we start with the family that you came from, what would you say was the biggest influence that your parents imparted
Passed
on you
on.
guys? Yeah, what
Yeah.
passed on to you guys? Your mom, I assume, had very different things that she passed on than your dad.
That's true.
Yes.
So how would you?
I read that part in the book about
Okay.
Yeah, here.
I'm actually, Barbara, while you're finding that, I'm looking at Dad's Guy Rivera.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Hal just got the same matching one
did,
in
in
Houston.
Houston.
So I'm looking forward to a grandfather-grandson picture that shoot this summer, you know?
Very nice.
I think our mom, Barbara can talk about our dad. I'll say, well, because she's going to read something. Our mom is preternaturally calm.
Very.
We actually really tried hard to rile her up as teens and really still now as adults.
Yep.
And we could never do it. On the day of my wedding, she walked in, Barbara and I were asleep together, and she's like, good morning, it's a beautiful day for a wedding. A tornado came overnight and knocked everything down, but it's gonna be wonderful. And Barbara and I were like,
We were both
Mom,
like,
are you on something? Like, she just is so calm and I'm not. So but it's such a good way as a mother to be. We never felt worried about anything. You know, she didn't make us worried about life, and I think that's such a precious gift.
And she always, her advice always was, don't worry about the little things. So that, I mean, there will be big things in your life that you will need to worry about, but
So save the energy.
save the energy for those rather
Great
than
advice.
the small things. So my dad, I mean, I think one thing that's interesting about our parents and our grandparents is people feel like they know them because they're public, but they, especially with, I feel it more with our dad, he was very characterized, obviously, in a lot of different ways when 24-hour news and, you know, all of a sudden now we have access to our leaders all day, every day, and we can see every gaffe they make. And we're all human and we all will say the wrong things sometimes. But one thing that people don't, I think, necessarily think about my dad is how he's incredibly good at nuance and he's incredibly good at just holding the gray area, which my therapist actually told me men are pretty bad. Men like to fix things.
Right.
And Dad,
Yeah, Dad is
does
kinda
like
woke.
to fix things, but he'll sit with it. You know, it's if there's something for him to do, he'll fix it. But if not, he'll just sit with you when you're hurting.
And so there's this part in the book that I'll read because it'll describe it better. But so I was in my 30s and thought I was going to marry someone, and we broke up, and it was the right decision, definitely, because we would be divorced by now, but it still hurt. And so I wrote, my dad was the first person I called after that breakup. I don't know why. I never shared much about my relationships with him. I'm private like my mother, but through it all, struggling to hold the belief that someone could be wonderful while also understanding you shouldn't build the rest of your life with them, I relied on my dad. And daily, he would call or text just to check in, just to share the burden with me. He didn't make promises of things getting better or the relationship ultimately working out, but he just shared that while my heart hurt now, it would not always feel that way. Every single morning I would wake to a text from him just saying hi, his usual, love you baby, and in a small way affirming that heartbreak hurts and that is okay. I picked up the pieces, but he never stopped texting every morning. Every night I read a meditation, a short modern day interpretation of a Christian Bible verse meant as a form of silent prayer before I doze off. And every morning he rereads the same meditation from the same book, texting me the verse, which he has illustrated by emojis. I text back my own emoji picture. It is short and it is daily, 5:30 a.m. Texas time, 6:30 a.m. New York time, waiting there for me when I open my eyes. It is so simple, and yet it is everything.
I love that. That tells you
And
volumes.
actually, I was like, wait, why am I not on these texts? So in a public forum just like this, I got added.
She's now on
I'm
them.
on them now.
Oh, good.
I was like, do I need to get my heart broken to get a text from you every morning? But then he added me.
He added her.
Yeah.
So,
And our
But
Aunt
that's
Dora.
just them, and that was very
Yeah.
much our grandfather. They
I love
walked
that.
the walk. I mean, Dad, over COVID, he still does this every morning. All of his friends that were single or widowers, etc., since the first day of COVID, he
Till
called
now.
every single one of them every morning. And he still does, and they're people that he definitely had never talked to
wow.
every
They're
single
like
day.
kind of the stragglers, you know? And he calls them, and I was like, what's Dad doing? I guess it was over Christmas. I'm like, I didn't know this because Barbara lived in my parents' basement during COVID, as I mentioned. I'm obviously have some built up
Yes.
resentment because she had a chef and I had me. And I was also doing the show from I mean, if we can actually go to that Parents Magazine
Do you
picture.
want to return your compliment about Dad and then
Okay,
go to this?
no, I'd like to go to this. Now, this looks, you can probably tell from my husband's face, we're in June of 2020, okay? Or maybe May. It probably looks like everything's going great, right? If you zoomed in on my face, you would see big scabs of impetigo that I got from changing that little person's diaper. I had some sort of bacterial infection all over my body. If you could zoom into my toenails, you would see that they hadn't been cut or trimmed, or we didn't have any of the necessities, and I was too scared to go outside. So they're yellow and
they're like Guinness Book of World Records.
yeah, they actually were long enough that they twirled, if y'all remember that picture from the
Oh,
90s.
my.
That's like maybe an exaggeration, but close.
So everything
this
looks wonderful, but behind me to the left, there are two children punching each other in front of the Parents Magazine people. I'm pretty sure that Mila was like, I like my dad better. And I'm like, this is a profile of me, Mila. I am going to be on the cover of Parents Magazine. She's like, Daddy is so much nicer than Mommy. I'm like, please don't quote that. So anyway, simultaneously to this, Barbara was being fed by a chef in my parents' nicely cleaned home.
Yes, I was. It was
So
great.
there's some resentment, obviously. Anyway,
Well, the fact that the texting,
I think you were going to say something sweet about someone.
no, I wasn't. That's what I was going to say. And I'm sorry that y'all can't zoom in on the toenails.
No,
'cause
it's
they're-
good. Don't.
They actually were like,
You
do
did
you
Photoshop.
mind if we, look, they just changed the picture because they were like, enough. They were like, do you mind if we Photoshop a few things? I'm like, what do you mean? The scabs that are all over my face from the impetigo my son gave me? Please, feel free. Anyway, it was great.
well, it does seem like the texting is, part of what goes on in your family. I wish I had brought it with me. Unfortunately, I left it back home. I have a 3-ring binder of all the notes
Yeah.
that I've gotten from your grandparents over the years. And at some point I probably should give them to the library or something because they're just remarkable. And so there's clearly this culture of letter writing in your family. The texts are sort of the modern version of it, I guess, in some ways. But there's a lot of notes between the two of you. Can you talk about that? Does the next generation still write the letters like your grandparents
way
did?
they
We don't
did it.
really
Yeah.
know. We wish we did, and I always think I'm going to. And I actually did write some last summer, but they're still sitting on my desk, and I never mailed them, and now they're out of
Hoda
date.
actually writes a letter to her daughters every single morning before work.
Wow.
I know. Oh, thank you for that picture. Right on time, right on cue. I know. I can't believe she does that every single morning.
very sweet.
I wish I could do that.
Wow.
I can. Just got to wake up a little earlier.
Well, let's talk for a second about the other half of this, which is all the found people in your lives and the bonds you've created with some of those people. For example, Global Health Corps, one of the things I learned in the book was that you pair up two different people from two different nationalities to bring different perspectives to problem solving. I thought that was fascinating and its own sort of way about
Sisterhood.
superpowers,
Yeah.
of bringing the most talented aspects of people together.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the found sisters that you
Yeah.
have of either sex, I guess, that you've come across.
Absolutely. So she mentioned Global Health Corps, which is an organization that I founded about 13 years ago, maybe, can't even remember. I was 26 and now I'm 40, so 14 years ago. And what it is it was based off the Teach for America model, the idea that we can recruit creative young leaders to work instead of in education in global health and try to bring new solutions to a field that needs more, obviously, as we saw with COVID. And so every day we recruit young leaders from around the world. They serve with us for a year, embedded in communities, solving health issues there. And then they go through our training focused on advocacy and policy change and entrepreneurship so that they have the skills they need throughout their lives to affect change on global health issues. And we've worked with thousands of young leaders now. And as she mentioned, they always work on teams from 2 different countries, so they have a global perspective, but so that each of them can bring their different superpower to the table, and all of a sudden what they're working on has different viewpoints, and the solutions end up being different. And I already had my dream job, which is so tricky as a professional to then go to a different job after having your dream job, because I got to work with young leaders that every single day were waking up trying to make the world better. And global health is a hard field, not surprisingly, because on a bad day, it often means, something really bad happened to somebody else. And so it's so important to have your superpower friends walking alongside you so that you know that even if you had a bad day today, there's thousands of others of you that can move forward. And so I was incredibly lucky at Global Health Corps. I was young when we started it, so I hired all these people that were older than me I didn't have that many years experience, but I knew I had a lot of energy, that had more life experience, and it ended up that our senior leadership team was all women. And we were creating this thing together. We were building it from scratch together, so there's no competition because it's all of our baby trying to create something great that will make an impact. And they ended up being my best friends live in Rwanda and Uganda and all these other parts of the world because I was commuting to those places every day. Not every day, every week. And it was so important because we all had deeply shared values about the power of people to change the world, and that regardless of where you lived, you deserved access to anything you needed to survive. And also when you're traveling in row 40, like seat E, for 14 hours on a plane ride, you want to be seated next to someone that's really funny and fun and can hang with you. And so we all ended up being best friends because we were in bunk beds in Zambia for 2 weeks. And so those are the people, we had a baby together basically is what it felt like. And now it's 12 years old and doing great, and we have a new CEO.
Wow.
But those are and were my superpower sisters, and they were stepping up every day to serve other people.
I often say about your father that someday he will get the credit he deserves for everything he did with PEPFAR
Yeah.
in Africa.
Yeah.
And you know, those of us in the room here probably know exactly what he did, but the rest of the world, I think it'll come out, with time. But you wrote a book called Anna's Story about your experiences, also in Africa because of AIDS. Is that right?
It was in Latin America.
Oh, but you went to Africa for UNICEF, right?
I went to Latin America with UNICEF.
got it.
Barbara was in Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and when I lived in Latin America, my job for UNICEF, I was younger, and so my job was to write, meaning I could meet with teens and adolescents, and it wasn't intimidating. I was about their age. I mean, I was 24, 25. And my job was to write their stories. And we were actually with our good friend last night, who is a photographer, who did beautiful portraits. And the reason we did it was for funders here in the United States, so that they knew where their money was going. It wasn't, I feel like stories, people's lives are what make change. Statistics really don't, And so during that work, I met an incredible young girl. Her name is Anna. She's 17. She was 17. Now she's much older. She was a single mom. She faced abuse in her home. She dropped out of school. It's like all the issues that UNICEF tries to work with impacted her. And so I ended up writing her story. I was a teacher before I moved there, and I was like, this story needs to be told so my students see how other kids live around the world. So I wrote Anna's story in 2006. That was
For young adults.
For young adults.
Yeah.
So, I wrote her story. We met every single day, and I wrote her story so that others could be empowered by her.
And you're now telling stories
Yes.
at the Today Show, which is a
Yes.
whole different world
Yes.
of sisters, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that,
it is. I
having
mean,
their life.
I would never have expected it,
Yeah.
I
There
feel
they
like
are.
I have my dream job too. And I love the people that I work with. I mean, Savannah and I are wearing red shirts because we did Get Fit in January thing where we learned to dance.
Fun.
I know, it was really fun. And we did the dance on the plaza, but I was 5 months pregnant with Hal. So like people were like, so you're supposed to be getting fit. And I was like, yeah, I probably need to announce that I'm having a baby. But it's so much fun. Like I want to be with her. She's one of my best friends. I love being with Hoda. People will be like, it's time, and my other best friend, Oprah. Oprah smells so good. She does, just like you would think, like orchidy.
When Jenna interviewed
Orchidee.
Oprah, she kept saying in front of her kids, she was like, it was the best day of my life. And finally Mila was like, Mom, stop saying that.
I was like, I'm gonna move in with Stedman and Oprah, and Mila was like, why would you leave us? And I'm like, no, Mila, I'm not actually gonna leave you. I mean,
She's like, but I would if I was
yeah,
invited.
but I'm like, believe me, if they're gonna give me a room in Santa Barbara, I'm there. She also brought us produce from her garden. She has like lemon and lime trees. I mean,
Oprah
I'd
does?
be very happy in Oprah's lifestyle.
Wow.
Me too.
Anyway,
I think we all.
Wouldn't we all?
yeah, we all would.
Yeah, we all would.
You're right. I've never been to her house, but I'd love to invite myself. We used to text, but I've kind of fallen out of practice. So how do you text back? Like,
I think text her today and say I saw a picture of you and was thinking of you.
okay, that's a good
That's a
idea.
great
Because
idea.
it's sort of hard to get back
With some
in there.
emojis.
You know what I mean? We mainly only text about books, and I don't really have anything to allow to her at this point.
No, you have a new book.
Yeah, but I can't be like, here's my new book. I am mailing it to her, hoping she puts it on Instagram, but she might not. No, I just am. Barbara's right. I just should just pop in
Yeah,
a
just
DM.
a nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Thinking of you today, Oprah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I thinking of you. Emojis, lots of emojis.
Yes.
Okay, so
You know what she does that's really cool?
What?
She sends voice memos.
Oprah does?
So like I sent her biscuits once as a gift, and she sent me, and she's like, Jenna, I just got the biscuits. They're delicious. And it's her voice in a memo. So then I could listen to it over and over again. I'm not sure if I saved it or not.
just get like an old school tape recorder and record
I don't know, but that was like driving Mila crazy because I just kept listening to it over and over again. And she's like, stop talking about Oprah, Mom. Anyway, my kids are going to need some serious therapy. Just kidding. I'm a good mom, right?
You were on the cover of Parenting Magazine.
Yeah. Mila's here on this Texas tour.
Oh, good.
But she actually flew from Austin, where we were this morning, by herself on Southwest Airlines.
Oh, my.
So, and Grammy, my grandmother was picking, or not my grandmother, our mom was picking, her Grammy was picking her up from the airport.
Oh, that's sweet.
She was very nervous, but also excited.
And she was did the unaccompanied minor.
Yeah,
thing.
remember we used to always do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so final question. From the family you come from or from your found families, what's the most important lesson? Like, what's your best takeaway on superpowers and making neighborhoods thrive and all the things that you talk about in this book?
Well, I feel like the thing I've learned from Mom and Dad the most, which just, I mean, this picture reminded me, is that they didn't pressure us to be anything but ourselves. And they also they allowed us to fail publicly. Remember I mentioned the community service? And I think that's a really incredible way to parent, you know? I mean, he was president and he never was like, you know, be this way or dress this way. I mean, I went to, the University of Texas and like, you know, no, y'all, why are you hissing? Why are y'all hissing at me?
Because we're at A&M. Because we're at A&M.
We love cats, but is that something Aggies do? They hiss at Texas people? And they put up their hisser?
But what about a claw?
Why do they they go this. I remember. Ooh, I shouldn't do that. I'm going to be struck down. Actually, y'all will love this story. When I was at the inauguration, the Texas band played. This was like the inauguration for my dad, and they played The Eyes of Texas. So I did the Eyes of Texas thing, and all over Europe, they said I was a Satan worshiper because I was doing this. It was like on the cover of like European magazines that said I was in a satanic cult, and I'm like, no, I was just singing my school theme song. Jeez. But you know, that they allowed us to fail, which makes being an adult possible. You know, I think had we had tons of pressure on ourselves, we wouldn't be as happy as we are. And so I think, you know, that's a superpower in itself, and something that I hope to emulate, because it's not that easy to let your kids be themselves, you know, and make mistakes, because you want to, as Barbara said, men and also women want to fix everything. And so that's something I'm hoping to have the courage to do.
You know, I saw in this book that you had interviewed Maya Angelou.
Yes.
And asked her, what's the best way to parent?
Yes.
And she basically said that.
Let
experience.
him be. Yeah.
You got to live life.
Yes.
And
I know. I was. I also thought she was my best friend, and I interviewed her when I wanted her to be my best friend, but she liked me, but I don't think she wanted me to be her best friend. I was pregnant with Mila, who's now 9, so this was, you know, almost 10 years ago, and I got to go to her house in Harlem and sit at her kitchen table, and she'd written a memoir called Mom, Me, and Mom, and it was all about her mother and then how she was a single mother to her son. And it was, if you are looking for something to read, it's a beautiful book, and it's really interesting to see how somebody would shape her to be as incredible as she was. So I just cried and cried and cried at her kitchen table. It was therapeutic.
What would you say the biggest lesson is?
Well, I'd say, I mean, something that's really unusual about grieving publicly is you end up learning all these things. With both of our grandparents, we learned all these things about their lives that we never knew when they were living, especially because they were so humble. I mean, my grandfather, humility was probably the most important characteristic of him. And right before, I'll share 2 very quick stories about this, but right before he passed away, right after my grandmother died, he ended up going to Maine by himself because we all thought that my grandmother would be joining him. We just didn't expect her to go when she did. And so no family was in Maine yet, so I went there by myself. I could change my work schedule and just be with him there. And basically every day I would read to him. He would lay in bed and I would read love letters, the letters that he had written to my grandmother and his mom when he was about to deploy for World War II. And I didn't know all these things about him. Like, he was good at everything. He was basketball captain, baseball captain, soccer captain. He, in the letters, it's so cute. He's writing to his mom and he's worried that my grandmother's gonna blow him off. She's just a girlfriend at the time. And I guess the term is give the fluff. So he's like, Mom, I'm so worried Barbara's gonna give me the fluff. But the other thing that he was begging his mom to do, because he lied about how old he was too young to enlist. And he kept, in every letter to his mom, he would say, Mom, don't forget, don't tell anyone how old I actually am, because he was worried that she would mention his age and then he wouldn't get to be deployed, and he ended up being the youngest fighter pilot in World War II. But I would read him these letters and I would think he was about to doze off to take a nap, and I'd sort of wrap up and gonna sneak out of the room, and I'd start sneaking out and he'd go, continue. And so I just kept reading him the letters. And then at night I would dress him up, put a blazer on him, and we would go eat oysters and he would drink martinis, because it was like, he was 94, let the man live, really.
Right.
But I loved finding out, I find out all these things about him that people will say to me. They'll stop me in the airport and say, your grandfather said this to me once, and it,
It's amazing.
did something kind, and it changed my life. And then about my grandmother, the same thing happens, and this is a more personal story, but I had a baby 6 months ago named Cora Georgia, and that's her.
She's so
and
cute. Yeah, really.
I thought I was going to deliver in New York, and my husband and I were in Kennebunkport, and I went into labor 6 weeks early. And so it didn't occur to us that she might come then, so I woke up at 4 a.m. in labor and was like, oh no. We're Googling the closest hospital nearby. My husband calls them and he's like, I think my wife's in labor. Do you guys do that thing there? And I'm like, get in the car.
Wait, and then he asked if there was.
He also goes, so about parking, do you guys have free parking?
Come on.
And I'm like, I will pay for parking. So luckily we get in the car. It's an hour away. Thank God we got in the car when we did, because Cora Georgia was a tiny, tiny baby woman on a mission. She was ready to enter the world. And we got there and she arrived about 2 hours later. And because she was a preemie and she needed some support to get healthier, she had to be in the NICU. So they immediately took her into the NICU. And this was obviously totally unexpected. And I didn't know how she was, because they took her right away after I delivered her. And we went into the NICU to visit her, and she was in her tiny, tiny little girl in her little bassinet. And on the wall, it was the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital. Obviously named after my grandmother, which I had no idea, but my grandmother and grandfather lost a 4-year-old girl to leukemia. And so children's health was always so important to my grandmother. And there, after just delivering my baby, who I immediately felt like it was divine and that, we were going to be okay, and my grandmother was there somehow. Then all the nurses had met we'd gone to Maine with her every summer of our life. She always went, I had no idea, she always went to the hospital. She always read to the kids. She would go and support the NICU nurses, who were angels, working every day with sick kids. And I found all of this out after the fact. She never once mentioned, for the weeks we would stay with her in Maine when she would go do this, she never said she was doing it. She was just showing up. Yeah. And I think that humility and also walking the walk are 2 lessons that I learned from them, that I keep learning from them, because I keep learning more things about them as we get older.
I love that. That is a great note to end on.
Thank you guys so
Thank you
much.
Thank you.
And don't forget,
you're a wonderful moderator.
Yeah, thank you. You were wonderful.
Wonderful conversation.
Can you come with us to Dallas?
Sure.
Yeah, we have an event in Dallas
And
tomorrow.
don't forget, if any of y'all need a point, I'd like a reading is sexy pillow, okay?
And if you can only get through
half or like maybe 3/4.
Barbara will
I'll
finish
take
it.
it over.
And I'll get it in 27 years.
Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
so
Thank
much,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.